Hello everybody, welcome to Short Shot Archery. Anthony here, and today I am with Dr. Judy, and we're going to actually go through Brady's situation with the drug testing. So Brady put out a video at the end of last year, because we're actually filming this on the first day of 2021, but he put out a video talking about how he was drug tested by USADA, and then it came back positive, and he was like, hey, I did not take any banned substances, so therefore he figured that it had to have been his prescription that he was taking for his thyroid. He then submitted that to USADA. They tested it and found out that it was contaminated. So this video is about, mostly the doctor here talking about how, contaminations and stuff.
How this could have happened, kind of hopefully answering some of your questions as far as, is this something that could happen to you? How can you protect yourself against it? What's the likelihood of this happening to you? Things along those lines.
Because overall, Brady did a pretty good job, but Judy here has, a background, and you went to school for years to get a degree. You have a doctorate in pharmacy, so you're a doctorate of pharmacy. So she's pretty qualified to go over this. Anybody else more qualified would probably work for a drug company.
In which case, they probably wouldn't tell you what I'm going to tell you.
So this should be pretty solid information. Of course, we'll be providing links and stuff, and go and research it and go through it yourself. But we try to put together the most relevant information just to give you a better, more broader idea. This is really not about Brady, more about just his situation. But since he basically brought this to, brought it to light, we figured that, we could do something about it, kind of helping to educate other archers and just other sports too, because if archery has this problem, then it could easily be an issue for any other sport in the United States and possibly the world, depending on how, precise your country's drug testing is, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so let's get started in this. Most of this is going to be by Dr. Judy because I'm not really qualified, but I'll probably throw my 2 cents in here and there.
Yeah. So basically, if we start off with what is allowed to be in a prescription medication, right? Because this is the source of the illicit use drug, whatever. So basically, you have 2 components to pharmaceutical. You have the active drug, the active ingredient. That's the thing that's doing the job in the body. And then you have the inactive ingredients. The inactive ingredients are not allowed to have any effect in the body. They're there just kind of be filler. They're there to help, keep it together, maybe keep its shape, keep its structure, so that way it can go through the stomach, doesn't dissolve too fast, or something along those lines. But it's not allowed to have any type of actual mechanism in the body. So the question is, with Brady, where did the hydrochlorothiazide come from? Hydrochlorothiazide is an active drug. It has a purpose. That's why it's banned. It's a diuretic. So it can only be considered an active ingredient. So for that reason, if it was an active ingredient and it was supposed to be there, it would have been listed as part of the drug in, the drug name. The drug name is levothyroxine, not levothyroxine hydrochlorothiazide. So it cannot, it can only be an active ingredient. It cannot be an inactive ingredient. So thus it's not supposed to be there. It's not something that they manufactured on purpose. They cannot slip hydrochlorothiazide into the drug as an inactive ingredient, no matter what percentage it is. Brady did say at one point that in his video, kind of alluding to that the drug companies can kind of slip things into pills without telling you. Yes and no. There is a way for you to look up what the inactive ingredients are, because obviously you know what the active ingredient is. It's the name of the drug. Yeah. So if you want to know what the inactive ingredients are, it's not going to be hydrochlorothiazide, spoiler alert. But if, say, you have a issue with digesting certain things. Like
gluten?
Yeah, like gluten.
Okay, like gluten.
Exactly. Yeah. So say you want to make sure that there's no, none of those type of substances, you can actually look it up. It's just a little complicated. There is a website that we'll put a link to. It's called dailymed.nlm.nih.gov. dailymed.nlm.nih.gov. So it's a little long, but if you go there, you search based off of what your drug is. So we're going to search levothyroxine, we'll say. The tricky part is that you have to know what manufacturer you have, because every manufacturer has different inactive ingredients. So you can find that on your prescription label. You can ask the pharmacist which one you got. But basically, once you find the drug and the manufacturer, you can go to that link. It'll come up with a huge, we call it the package insert. It has all the nitty-gritty information that you don't need to know about a drug. That it's everything that I need to know about the drug, basically. Everything with the clinical study and everything. But if you go to number 11, they're all numbered, the sections. Number 11, it's consistent. It's the description. It'll tell you what the active ingredient is and list the inactive ingredients. So there is a way to find out what is in there if you do have some sort of allergy.
But you definitely have to go through steps to get there, because they're not just going to easily give it to you, because generally, I guess you probably wouldn't have to look for that.
No, not unless you have, like, I had a patient once who had an allergy to a certain red dye, so we had to look up what the inactive ingredients were in terms of the dye. But it's, honestly, we don't do it very commonly. Yeah. So that's what's supposed to be in a product. Okay. Now the question comes into what happens when there's contamination. So theoretically, if there's contamination, you would have a recall. Right?
Yes.
They would come out and they would say that, so the question is, has anyone heard of a recall? Well, recalls don't always make it to the consumer level.
Okay.
Actually, they did kind of a study, looking at how many recalls there were. From 2013 to 2018, so 5 years, there were over 8,000 medications recalled. Okay, in the U.S. Well, made in the U.S. and abroad, but for the U.S. That's 8,000, drugs. That's not pills. So that's, millions of pills, right? So there's tons of recalls every day, just to let you know. Now, these recalls are only when there's a proven occurrence of something wrong. So basically, how do we prove that something is wrong? Usually that's through some sort of FDA inspection. So then that brings us to what happens when the FDA actually inspects the places. Well, see, the FDA, they're a little backlogged from the studies that I've read.
Oh, government for you now.
Yeah. So they were saying in the past decade, over 2,500 facilities, foreign and domestic, have gone over 5 years without an FDA inspection.
That's pretty bad.
And they had no drug quality inspection records over the past decade for more than 1,200 domestic plants.
Which is kind of worse, because we should be able to control what's under our own roof, at least, what's being processed, manufactured in the United States.
Yes, so it's a problem both domestic and foreign in terms of where our drugs are made. Now, when they actually do the inspections, who actually does the same thing when an inspector's there versus on a daily basis? Nah.
Yeah, because if you work at, it seems like if you work at any kind of big box, big corporation company, it's, the higher-ups are coming today.
Supervisor's here? Okay, everyone.
Everybody put their smile on. Oh, by the way, we're going to clean out all this stuff.
Yeah, hide this real quick, get this hidden, right?
And generally, at least, we're talking very general here, not just for pharmaceuticals. Generally, the higher-ups already know what's going on, and they just kind of go, oh, you cleaned it all up.
Yeah. So, what are the chances that the inspection's actually going to find something? Well, maybe they're surprise visits, right? Maybe they walk in and just happen to see something. Well, in terms of a lot of the medications that are made nowadays are made overseas. You can't exactly do a surprise visit to China. Chances are you probably need some sort of paperwork to be allowed to go over there for business.
Probably like a visa, but they also probably want to know, depending on the country too, because we're not just singling out like China, but in general, hey, what are you doing in our manufacturing plant for medications?
Right.
Hey.
So we have that, and then also they're going to need some sort of translator. Well, apparently they use the same translators for multiple plants. Mm-hmm. And the translators have loose lips on when the inspectors are coming. Now,
this is from like reports and stuff from other people. This isn't just like a hearsay thing people have.
No, this is actually, there was a whistleblower from the FDA who was a previous inspector. There was a whole interview done with Kaiser Health News about kind of the problems with the FDA inspections and how they don't go as smoothly as they should. Mm-hmm. So these are actual accounts from FDA inspectors that are saying that these are their experiences.
We'll have links to that.
Yes, we'll
in
definitely
the description down below.
Yeah. So generally, there aren't always surprise visits. Even when there are somehow maybe surprise visits, they aren't always welcome in the facility. Apparently, there are accounts that people staged a protest outside of the warehouse, a workman's strike, I think it was, and they wouldn't let the inspector pass, so they wouldn't let them inside the building. When they did finally let the inspector inside the building, they kept the lights off. They would not turn the lights on. So the inspector had to do everything with a flashlight. And apparently he couldn't quite identify, but there was tons of powder caked on the floor. So even with a flashlight, it looked questionable.
Yeah.
So, and this is like not unusual. There's multiple accounts of people, blocking entrances to facilities so that way inspectors cannot come in. Mm-hmm. So this is, you probably already knew they were coming and you still didn't clean up?
Yeah. This is really sloppy.
Yeah. And so even when they find inspectors find problems, then what happens? The FDA has very little power to force a drug maker to fix something. Mm-hmm. They do the inspection, but they don't really have the follow-through power necessarily. So it's common for the inspectors to flag the same violations over and over again. Over the past decade, they had a report that 70 drug plants, most of which were domestic, were penalized for the same violation at least 4 times.
So they're having problems,
and they just repeat the problems.
Some of them are actually getting like cited on it, though, even though there is like some like jamming
resistance.
Yes, the more the resistance though is on the like foreign, like overseas.
As far as the accounts, most of that was overseas.
But then again, there might not be that happening domestically, but they still know when the inspector gets there, and odds are they're friends. And things are already getting cleared up, but they're still getting caught on things.
On the same things.
But on the same things. So that they're too lazy to even fix their own, errors that they're being cited for by the FDA.
Yeah.
So that's kind of wild.
And of those 70 plants that had been cited for the same thing more than 4 times, a third of them had already issued a recall. So it's one of those that, like, they made a product, it was bad, they issued a recall, and they still didn't fix it.
Yeah, which is...
What are you doing?
Yeah, it's really, like, sloppy.
Right.
Like, really unprofessional. For something that's important, too.
Right, it's important.
It's not like we're making, I don't know...
Cake.
Yeah.
You can
be a waste of food, but, like, medicine actually, like... saves people's lives and stops them from going to the hospital and dying. Like it's important. Like, this is something that's actually, out of everything, this is probably one of the most important things. Like, some of this could be not even just like your regular person, like babies, old people.
Yeah.
Like, you're talking about the most vulnerable of society are also facing this. Maybe you don't care about the average pretty in all right shape person, but like the children, the poor children,
right? The poor children.
No, really, yeah. Like
no, it really did. There was a in the Kaiser Health News report that we'll post. Most of the article was actually about a recall of an over-the-counter medication that did lead to hospitalization and death of a few people, from children specifically, because their product it actually had I believe it was a bacteria in it, and they had to do this mass recall. But the issue is they only recalled it after all these people came forward and they found a link. So it's not even, how do you miss that there's a bacteria in your product?
Yes, that should have been figured out through like the
Shouldn't you be testing? Shouldn't you be monitoring?
The FDA going in and actually, testing it, because they test the purity and stuff of the products.
Yes and no. They test the purity of the products when they first, as far as I could research, I should clarify. My specialty is in pharmacologic activity, not in the pharmaceutical industry. But as far as my research could find, they test the purity of substances when they want to come to market, when they want to get, the ability to make their product, to prove that they can make the product, not continually.
All right.
I could be wrong, but I could not find any evidence that there was a rule that you had to continue testing. You have to keep like different, lots and batches.
Yes.
That you can come back and, say this is the batch that I had, but you don't always necessarily have to monitor the batch.
All right.
But I could be wrong. So that one I did not do extensive research into. I was having a difficult time finding information on that.
All right. So how do we bring this, how does this now relate back to like the individual, like an archer like Brady or me or anybody else that's going to national, international tournaments that could be drug tested?
So bringing it back, what are they actually, say that they follow the inspections, that they do everything they're supposed to, what are they allowed to contain in terms of cross-contamination? There are actually measures that there's an acceptable amount that you're allowed between different products.
So there's a tolerance?
There's a tolerance, yes.
Okay.
So there's no absolute set rule that the FDA puts. Say, in this situation with Brady, that the company was making the hydrochlorothiazide, and then next up came the levothyroxine. Well, what if there was hydrochlorothiazide left in the machines, that, whatever they used, thus when they started making the levothyroxine, you have some cross-contamination. So that is my guess as far as what happened. So what are they actually allowed to do? The FDA does not make any specific rule because they say, in general, there's too much variety in manufacturing that one rule would not work for everyone.
So they can't just blanket, like, regulate everything, because then it would be unfair. You would stifle the industry,
right?
Because there's too many. Basically, you're saying there's too many varieties of pills and ways to make a pill.
Yeah.
That it would hurt the people that actually need it more than it would solve a problem.
Right. So what they say is the manufacturer. FDA tells the manufacturer you need to make a rule yourself. Set a limit and stick to it. You need to have it documented that this is your rule and this is what you're monitoring for. So.
Like self-regulation, sort of.
Right.
Yeah, but that's kind of the problem in a way, because the rule is vague, or you don't know, right?
Right. As a consumer, we don't know what the rule is. They don't release that publicly. They give it to the FDA, hopefully, but there's no way for us to check. So there are some kind of rule of thumbs that have been used for quite some time, for several years, decades probably, that have been documented as kind of like suggestions or ideas to start with, basically.
Okay, so like general industry practices for their own self-regulation.
Right.
Basically.
So some of those ideas would be you could have no visible residue between one batch and the other.
Okay.
Okay.
Visible. I see pretty good, but if you've been to science class, there's a lot going on surfaces that the human eye cannot see.
Right. So not too specific necessarily,
yeah.
But one of the other rule of thumbs is no less or no more than 10 parts per million. So what does that mean? If you have 10 grams of the hydrochlorothiazide per million of grams of levothyroxine covered in.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot have more than that. So 10 grams per a million grams, basically. So that seems pretty good.
Yeah.
Right? Well, did a little bit of math, and it works. It would be okay for levothyroxine because levothyroxine is actually dosed in micrograms.
Okay.
Compared to hydrochlorothiazide, which is dosed in milligrams.
Okay.
So there's a difference of 10 to the negative 6 versus 10 to the negative 3.
Okay, so it's a lot of zeros.
So basically, levothyroxine, you only need a little amount.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a little bit of hydrochlorothiazide, you only have a little bit of levothyroxine anyways. Probably would not exceed 10 parts per million. So that would be an acceptable rule.
And would it still show up, though, on, a drug test?
Probably not. I cannot say for certain.
Okay.
But probably not.
Okay. But
what about some people take other drugs?
Mm-hmm.
Even there was a study where it was an athlete.
Mm-hmm.
He took 400 milligrams of ibuprofen.
Okay.
Okay. Over the counter is 200. Let's just say he took 200. 2 over the counter ibuprofens,
Yeah.
right?
Okay. Yeah.
Advil, whatever.
Not anything out of the
right?
norm. You can do that. Yeah.
Well, they found it was contaminated with hydrochlorothiazide. It had such a small amount of hydrochlorothiazide that they were still able to detect that it fit within the 10 parts per million.
Huh.
But that's because we're talking about, 400 milligrams of ibuprofen versus levothyroxine. Normally we're talking about like 100 micrograms. So there's a big difference in terms of the
contaminant versus the quantity of of what you actually wanted to take. If I get that right.
More so that 10 million grams of levothyroxine is going to be way more doses than that equivalent of ibuprofen.
Ah, okay, yes. Okay.
So you're intaking more ibuprofen than you would be levothyroxine.
Okay.
So thus, you could have more hydrochlorothiazide, which would actually show up.
Ah, okay. I see.
So levothyroxine is such a tiny amount that is actually given that if you have a tiny amount of hydrochlorothiazide, you probably would not actually register.
Okay. So then how does this relate back to
so for
Brady's and the pills?
They probably would have passed the 10 parts per million. But there's another rule of thumb. Okay.
All right.
That you could have 1/1000th minimum dose of, we'll say, the hydrochlorothiazide.
Okay.
Is okay to be in the max daily dose of levothyroxine. That, I'm going to just do the math for you, means that 100 micrograms of levothyroxine, which is a common dose, it can range anywhere from 25 micrograms to 300 micrograms. So 100, not many people are on the 300 or even the 200. So usually 25 to 150 is, 175 is like the common area. So I picked 100 in the middle. 100 micrograms of levothyroxine is allowed to have 2 micrograms of hydrochlorothiazide.
Okay.
Well, dun dun dun. The study that I talked about with the ibuprofen that the athlete had
taken
and tested positive, that it was only 2 micrograms of hydrochlorothiazide in his pills.
Okay.
So those 2 micrograms would give you a positive test.
So the contamination could
fall within an acceptable limit and still flag for a drug test.
So basically, we're looking at this broadly, is from the manufacturing side of things, they could be within their self-regulation and not be doing anything wrong, but you could have a dose, you could have enough of another byproduct, like extra byproduct in there, contaminant in there, that could go and put you over, even though they weren't actually breaking any rules.
Right, exactly. So, of course, it all depends on what drug you're taking and what the other contaminant is and dosing. So there's a lot of math involved. But theoretically, they could be abiding by the rules, and you could still get flagged. So
for Brady's situation with his pills being contaminated, it's very it's
very
well. Obviously, they proved that it was contaminated, but it also proves that it could
Yeah.
It could happen.
It could happen to anyone.
And it's not technically the manufacturer's fault because they're as long as they're within their set, guidelines of what they're allowed, their set tolerances.
Right.
Right?
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're going to get into the last portion of this.
Right. So basically, what do we do with all this information? How does this, help me as an athlete? What do I do? I think the biggest thing is don't freak out. Don't stop taking your medication. Obviously, it's prescribed for a reason.
Yes.
Obviously, you need it. If you don't need it, talk to your doctor and maybe you can come off it, but that's a different thing.
Yeah.
So don't freak out and stop taking your medication. Also, there seems to be a belief that you should just take brand name medication over generic, and that would be safer in terms of contamination. Not true. As I said already, I've already cited a few things that even if they're made domestically, they're still having issues with recalls. I can also tell you as a pharmacist, I have multiple times dispensed, opened up a bottle of brand and generic and the same pills come out. They take one set of pills and they just market them as the generic. If you're making it already, you might as well just send it as a generic too. So there's no point fighting your insurance to get a brand name medication. It still follows the same rules.
Yes.
Okay.
The same manufacturing rules.
Manufacturing rules, right.
Yes.
And so basically this could happen to anyone. So the only thing you can do is exactly what Brady said. Is if you're going to a competition and you're going to be taking medication, don't take all of it. You know what I mean?
Even if it's ibuprofen.
Even if it's ibuprofen. Even if it's over the counter.
Yeah.
I don't care. Especially if it's over the counter at that rate. Because they have even less regulation. They're not inspected.
Yeah.
So keep some of the medication. If you took this is my prescription or whatever, keep a few of them left. Exactly what Brady said. So that way, if you do show up positive, then you can say, this is the group of pills that I took. You can send them in, and exactly like Brady did, send them in, they get tested. You can prove that it was an accidental intake.
Yes.
Non-intentional, and that it was a contamination. So unfortunately, that is the only thing you can do to protect yourself.
It kind of sucks because it's really, I'm not the one, making the pills here. Right. But at the same point in time, they're technically not wrong because they're odds, they're probably within their guidelines. Maybe there is some foul play here and there with, not letting FDA regulator, in actually seeing what's going on in the manufacturing, both domestic and foreign. But, we got to do what we got to do. And the best angle we have at this point in time is, what Brady said, what Dr. Judy said here. You gotta keep some pills to the side so that you can protect yourself.
Right. Because this is one of those things that the drug tests can detect such small amounts. It's basically, if it can detect any hydrochlorothiazide, it shows up positive. It doesn't matter if it's actually strong enough to do anything in your body. It's all or nothing. So it does not take a lot of it to show up positive. So that is an important detail that is a little scary. Yeah. But hopefully this provides you with a little bit more insight as to how to proceed.
And just probably a little side note, because some people may be jumping to the, why is testing so strict and stuff? But honestly, we got to keep honesty in the sport. People are not going to take sports in general seriously if testing isn't taken seriously. So this is honestly our best answer, unless a lot of stuff really changes on the medical, the pill manufacturing side, and odds are it's just not, because I'm honestly, it'll probably come out if they made it tighter. You'll probably have effects in other ways where your medications will probably be more, because then they have to deep clean probably every single machine, every single time they run a different batch of pills, and then especially in the
decreased supply, you might have more back orders.
And we're already having issues with medications being too expensive, the supply of some medications being really hard to get to. So if we tighten up the rules to make things better, then it's a tough spot, and I'm not advocating for anything in particular, but I'm just saying that what Brady said and what we're covering here is honestly your best angle unless somebody else comes up with a more effective way at the moment. But I really would definitely recommend what Dr. Judy said with keeping your pills. Brady was on point with that.
Yes.
So we're just kind of backing him up in a sense, but we wanted to delve deeper into this.
Yeah, how this could have happened. Hopefully this gives you an idea, a little background of could this happen to you. If you take a medication, then definitely it could happen to you.
All right, so anything else you want to go over?
No, I think that wraps it up.
All right, so thank you so much for watching. I know this is probably a pretty long video, but I think it's really necessary. We'll have all the links in the description, so go through them, check them out. See where we got our information from. We did mostly Dr. Judy did a lot of work trying to verify all this, and you actually learned a whole bunch about...
I did. I learned a lot about pharmaceutical industry because contrary to popular belief as a pharmacist, we're not trained very much on pharmaceutical industry. That is not what I do. So I learned quite a bit, and it made me a little scared.
Yeah. But in the same point in time, you have the angle of, drug interactions and things like that, and dosing and...
Yeah, strengths and things along those lines, metabolism, which is very important when you're talking about how much do I intake compared to how much is coming out in my urine and at what time.
So, pretty cool overall. Depending on, people's questions and stuff, we might do a round to this. Obviously we'll see what the archery communities or just maybe even the sports community's response is in general. We really did just put this together to help. So hopefully people, enjoy that. Other than that, thank you so much for watching. Please share this video because we would, like to get a response from it and just get the word out, beyond just Brady's video. Other than that, thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and as always, happy shooting!